Besides Manish, who is from Amazon, we have Juby Jose from Intel, Dr. Samik Ghosh from SBI and XPX Corp, and also Aikomi from given by his backdrop, well, you're from Kerala, but from Japan. And we have Karan Verma from GE, and Dr. Mohanasankar Sivaprak from Chennai, IIT Chennai, and he is in Chennai too. Given this, we have this a really wide, or rather length of India represented in some ways. To set the context, we have. May I ask you to introduce yourselves, please? A quick short introduction, besides what I just said. Juby,
yeah,
please go ahead. You're the only lady we have.
Yeah. All right. So, hello everyone. Glad to be here. A quick note about myself. I'm Juby Jose, Senior Manager with Intel, based out of Bangalore. I've been in the industry for over 20 years now, with Intel for around 9 years. At Intel, I'm part of a group called Vertical Solutions Group, and we focus on two verticals, one being healthcare and second being transportation and smart transportation. So within healthcare, I lead our initiatives to help proliferate telemedicine, specifically with the focus on the India market. Personally, my career has been spent largely on embedded systems, both in engineering and product management functions. And the last 3-4 years, I've been closely involved with AI-based solutions for natural language processing and video analytics. That's my personal summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Juby. Samik, would you like to?
Sure. Thank you, everyone. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here participating from Tokyo. My name is Samik Ghosh. I am the Chief Technology Officer of SBX Corporation, and as well as a technical advisor to a startup on healthcare on the edge called Aikomi. We work at the intersection of computing and biology, providing platforms and solutions both in pharma space as well as at the point of care, which is with hospitals and clinics. My personal background, I come from computer sciences, was dabbled and worked in the telecom space, but then switched to biology in my graduate studies in the US, and then moved to Japan and have been in the field of pharma and healthcare for over 15 years now. And I look forward to the discussion. Thank you, Vipin.
Thank you, Samik. Karan, please.
Sure. Thank you so much. So, I have been with GE Healthcare for about 11 years, and the last couple of years have the opportunity of leading, and very few people know, other than our customers, that we have an IT vertical, which is very alive and thriving, and we're looking at growing it. So I have the opportunity of, leading that for South Asia, what we call as healthcare digital. And we're looking at more and more solutions to add to our already very wide portfolio of equipments to address, the virtual care as well as on-premise care delivery. So very excited to be part of this group.
Thank you, Karan. And I think you will have a lot to tell us about what GE does. Mohan, please.
Yeah, thanks, Bipin. I'm a faculty at IIT Madras in the Department of Electrical Engineering. And I head the Healthcare Technology Innovation Center, which I founded after I came back from US about 12 years ago. It's a fairly large center, which works with almost 30 to 40 industries in India, including GE. About 30 incubated startups in the center with about 100, 120 engineers, faculty, students, researchers. So it's a translational R&D center with an explicit goal that it will develop technologies and take it all the way into the market. So there are about 6 technologies that are already commercially successful. 2 or 3 of them are global products today. So there are many things that you will realize about healthcare. And one of the best things about it in India is it's still at the, I would say it's still at infancy. Its hockey stick is probably still hasn't arrived. So that shows that a lot of things that you can set both as a market leader as well as policy and of course technology standards. So it is in that context that I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohan, and welcome to all of you. Just to give a brief background of myself, I am pretty much like Jubi in the semiconductor and sensing and telecommunication background. That's been what I've done for almost 17 years of my life. Very recently, I've got or rather adapted some of these backgrounds, including edge AI, to the healthcare space. And in that, full disclosure, I work with a company called Systems Biology Institute, which is, an arm of Sumik's company. But yes, pretty much like all of you, and like Mohan said, it's a great time to be in this space. And I do believe that the space that all of you represent, IT, semiconductors, computer science, technology in general, is what is going to help us move to the next phase of healthcare in India. So given that context and this whole COVID space, I know, Karan, your family is currently going through a situation. And I think the whole telemedicine guidelines being released by the government of India has been accelerated by it. These guidelines released in March, I forget the date, but I think it was the second half of March, lays the grounds for it proliferating beyond what anybody in the past imagined. And I think we join a set of pretty much most of the growing world and the Western world, the developed world as well, in approaching telemedicine. But India, in that sense, is quite challenging. I mean, I was going through the statistics again released by the government of India, which talks about diagnostic centers for one. Karan, you may have info on this, and they say there's just about 100,000 diagnostic centers across India. I mean, if you talk about hospital beds, it says 90% of the beds in small clinics, in small hospitals are about, are less than 50 bed centers, and going more. And it talks about qualified doctors for pathology. It says across India there's not more than 6,000. I don't know if these numbers are right. I guess all of this gives us the size of the opportunity, and not just opportunity, but size of the impact that the work that you're all doing has. So I was hoping that Manish should also join in the meantime, but I guess we can start off the discussion, involve him as.
So Bipin, I've been around for a while now, just to let you know.
Oh, great. Manish, maybe we should have you on the main screen, and welcome. I don't know at what point you joined. Perhaps you can give a quick introduction like the rest of us did.
Yeah, sure. Right. I'll just do that very quickly.
On also, so the others can see what a good.
No, I somehow have a bit of camera trouble. Once let me finish the introduction, and I'll try and do it after that. So
sure.
That'll be better. So Manish Kapoor here. I am part of the AWS Amazon Web Services central government team focusing on healthcare. And as a result, I'm working on a lot of initiatives by the government of India in trying to reform and hopefully transform, digitally transform the healthcare delivery in this country. It's a pretty exciting space to be in as on date. Naturally, the pandemic has brought on a lot of focus, but even before that, I think the government had started putting the due focus on it. Currently, I think our stats as far as spend on the healthcare, etc., is concerned is pretty bad, and therefore from that perspective, there is only one way, and which is up, upwards from here onward. Technology will play a big role, given some of the fundamental challenges we face. We cannot overcome them simply through the conventional means of trying to have more doctors and more hospitals and more, more of equipment. That will be one part of the, remediation. But I think leveraging technology to do something which usually would be called as out of the box and bring service delivery to the patients is something which is very, very critical. And I think we are really pushing the envelope in that space. Uh, I have worked across several industries, and I've been in telecom, I've been in media and entertainment, retail. I've also been in financial industry doing digital transformation. So, well, it's sort of a mixed bag, which has a lot of learnings and lessons from different industries on what can be achieved today. In the overcoming the challenges in the health industry. So hopefully we'll make good use of whatever skill sets we all bring to the table, and in the end, make a meaningful impact in the Indian healthcare industry.
Great. Thank you, Manish. And I guess that sets us up to speed on the panel discussion and something that I have for Karan in terms of just adding to the context that you or the foundation that you laid. So Karan, I mean, can you give us a little more of the backdrop or the space that we are in, including, when we say edge, where is the edge? What is the edge? What is the ecosystem within which the edge operates in, both in the digital space and in the others? And of course, obviously, I mean, what GE offers in this to the entire ecosystem, hospitals, citizens, all of that. Karan, would you?
Sure. Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. So, where is the edge? Frankly, if you were to look 30, 40 years back, the edge was the center, right? So, and even today in India, the most of the hospitals and diagnostic centers, whatever IT they deploy is on premise. So the edge is the center, is what it has traditionally been in India. But really, we do see beginning to have movement, and especially good security cloud services like Amazon and the likes are really helping change that, right? So customers are willing to look at it, but they're typically willing to look at it for a few applications. Now, what's driving it, as we see as GE Healthcare, is two things. So one is the fact that even in metros, there you have a lot of these. So for example, in India, you have about 5,000 CTs. And today, given the COVID context, you only have about 10,000 radiologists, by the way. So how do you cope up? Earlier, chest CT would be probably 10 to 15 chest CTs in a day. That's shooting up to, at the peak, it was 100, 150. We've had cases of 200 chest CTs in a day on one CT. So one is the CT itself has to be great, but the other is how do you use edge, because some of these older CTs do not have the compute capability to deploy good AI algorithms to facilitate and speed up workflow, right? Given the paucity of radiologists. So edge computing really helps in that context where, you get all the image out on an edge box and do all of your valuable computing there and send it back to the radiologist for them to take a look at it and have a quicker workflow, right? So that's one use case scenario, and we've deployed a Edison, as we call the Edison Edge box in the US, and we're bringing it to India. Now, the issue with this is that, especially for markets like India, you have to look at workflow, which obviously we understand the workflow. So it has to be for it to be scalable, it has to be part of that workflow. Number two, the economics. So for a market like India, having even a thin edge, as it's called, right, which is a box with, let's say, 5 TB of data or 3 TB of storage, even that can be cost prohibitive, especially if you look at it in the tier 2 and beyond. So how do you use an even thinner edge to really help do this function? So that's one set of challenge we are looking at. And obviously cloud deployment helps. The other piece that you mentioned was the pure telehealth, which is, delivering it in the tier 2 and beyond. So there we
Karan, I think we lost your voice.
Sorry, can you hear me?
You're back.
Okay, we're harnessing an ecosystem of partners who we are helping shape the clinical use cases, the workflow, and then taking them to market. So right now we're working with quite a few such players who have good telehealth solution, and their edge computing again becomes a critical. So tele-OPD, being able to offer basic things like blood sample testing and urine sample testing in remote areas and being able to quickly
What's the
get
cost?
results
What's the
using.
cost of such a box, Karan? If I may, just to give a thing to the audience.
So the thin box, the thin box that I mentioned to you can range from about $5,000 to $25,000, depending on the number of applications. And that's good for some of the top hospitals. They would be more than willing, and they want an on-premise solution. So it's a great solution for them. But really, if you were to look at it, as I said, today we've made CT affordable. You can buy a CT for about 1.25 crores from GE, a new CT, right? Compared to it used to be 3, 4 to 5 crores. But the radiologist is an issue. So really having edge computing with the right economics to help the limited radiologists that we have to do the reporting really becomes a key barrier, as we see.
So I think maybe I'll use that. I mean, in the sense, how do you define a thin edge? What do you use a thin edge to lead into Juby, who's from Intel, and ask her, Juby, I mean, what is Intel? I mean, you're a semiconductor company. How are you folks leveraging healthcare? What is it that you do with healthcare and the AI? You mentioned AI. Is that what we can see in the future?
Oh, definitely. I think healthcare is one of the leading verticals which will significantly benefit from AI-based applications. Now, I'll give a perspective from our side, which is primarily a hardware or a semiconductor viewpoint. So edge computing is all about getting compute and data and processing capability closer to the source of data generation. Right? The data, as and when it is produced, you're able to act on it and take meaningful and impactful decisions. Now, the edge itself, so if this is a fairly broad definition, and frankly, all the industries kind of struggle with the definition of what is the edge, where is the edge, what should be the edge configuration, and healthcare is also evolving as we speak. So as we see that, edge computing, there are different tiers of deployment for edge computing. Edge computing is not a homogeneous deployment. I'll broadly categorize it into 3 parts. That edge computing could be deployed in a hospital premise, right, which is an existing institution. Edge computing can enable satellite centers for hospitals, which are new centers which are not probably available today, but are enabled by the capability of edge computing. So the satellite centers is an intermediate location. And then you have the final edge, which is in the hands of the consumer or the patient itself. Right? So these are roughly 3 tiers of edge computing, so to speak. Now, as you can imagine, the requirements of, specifically the hardware requirements for each of these tiers will vary. And why does it vary? Because the workloads that run in each of these tiers vary very widely. So for example, the first tier, which is a hospital premise, would be home to workloads like what Karan mentioned. If you have an AI model for interpreting the CT scans, the chest x-rays, for example. So those are examples of workloads that needs to run in a hospital premise. And off late with COVID, we have seen other innovative deployments like telemedicine kits, for example, right? So these are more powerful, novel form factors which are coming up in a hospital edge. That is one example. A satellite center, an example could be a telemedicine kiosk or a tele-ICU. It's a new satellite center which can be enabled with ICU capabilities because it can be monitored remotely. Right?
So do you have something like that, Juby? I mean, does Intel provide something like that?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, Intel is not a healthcare provider, but we do work with partners to set up or roll out these solutions. So both of these, tele-ICUs as well as telemedicine kiosks, are examples of solutions which have been deployed by partners. Right?
Using your semiconductors.
Of course. I mean, it requires general purpose compute, specific compute data, and Intel is one of the leading providers of these solutions.
And I guess we can use that to lead into Mohan's work at IIT Chennai and the startups. You mentioned there are about 30 startups working on different solutions. And I mean, please let us know what is your view on this whole number one, healthcare space. I mean, telemedicine space, healthcare as such. You had strong views on healthcare, um, uh, and how your I mean, HTIC is pioneering certain solutions which probably end users like us can use.
Sure, Vikram. So one of the key things which, I mean, especially if you're new to healthcare, you have to understand healthcare is a service business. This is actually not well understood. So 70, 60, probably 70% of revenue is actually a service revenue. And about 20, 25% is drugs and pharma. 5% is what we talk about as capital equipment, technology, and so on. So any innovation which you're trying to drive, in fact, Karan put it very nicely, at the end of the day, this affordability of CT was driven because there were enough people who were able to use that CT machine and provide a service. And I see this edge computing, be it increasing load in the same hospital, squeezing more out of existing hospitals, or doing a satellite center now that our network is actually quite good, or even think of a very thin edge, if you will, closer to home. Right? And there are certain models that are being tried. Eventually, it has to be embedded into the service delivery of the business. Right? So
you're saying two things. One is it's a business, and
it's a business.
Service business.
It's a service business.
Yeah.
So if you look at a hospital cost, right? I mean, fixed cost of the hospital is close to 60%, and most of them are salaries. Right? So it's essentially, even from a cost point of view, it's actually a service business. So there are several things that are being tried out in the country. The traditional telemedicine, which is basically just transferring images and data, that's going on. The other aspect is what we are looking at now with AI embedded radiology, AI in a broad sense. It doesn't have to make all the decisions right there. But this will advance over the next 5 to 7 years. We are seeing many startups trying to try this tele-ICU even close to home, close to smaller places. So there, not all the pieces are worked out yet. And one of the reasons is this complete smooth transition between the satellite center or between the home to the decision making and to the service revenue is not being worked out. So these efforts which technology providers are driving, they have to be done in much more close collaboration with the hospital sector. And of course, if it's the public health, then it has to be done closely with the public health, because at the end of the day, it's the larger numbers is what will drive a policy and adoption of such technologies and investments. So I'll come back to it when we get into the other discussion, but I want to leave you with this larger point.
Thanks, Mohan. And I'm going to use that statement that you said first, that healthcare is a service business, to lead into a question to Samik in terms of the service that they provide under ICOMI. And in that context, Samik, you have a perspective of both the Japanese and the Indian side. And I mean, the Japanese society is an aging society. How they have embraced telehealth, is Edge playing a role in that? Do you see that translating? Do you see that leading how India will play out in the next few, going forward? If you can tell us about all of that.
Yeah, thank you, Vipin. And yeah, so I think that we are living, all of us on this panel, as well as people who are participants, are living in very interesting times, right? So I think this is a time which will go down in history books as probably a quote unquote paradigm shifting time in terms of healthcare. So if you look at the Japanese perspective, why I'm making this statement is, of course, all of you are aware of statistics about Japan being an aging society, and 1 out of 4 people are over the age of 65. So clearly, I mean, commonsensically, there would be need of providing health care at the touch point where they are, because people probably would not be in a position to go to the hospitals or to the tertiary care centers. Now, what has happened is, of course, this had not, the push towards this was much less, simply because of inertia, which is there prevalent in the industry as a whole. But from my personal experience with one of the startups, which works in the space of dementia and people having mental health issues in Japan, which is iComi is the name of the company. So I'll just give that example because I have a hands-on real experience over the last 18 months. Why I say it's a potentially paradigm changing, paradigm shifting moment is even in the Japanese context, where typically iComi would be providing a tablet and the caregiver in what I call BC era, right? Before Corona era, the caregivers would be actually going with the tablets, sitting with those people having mental issues and trying to provide multimedia services to them, which is what iComi tries to do. Clearly that stopped 18 months ago. And there was absolutely no way that they could provide that service. So for the first like 3 to 4 months, it's almost like caught in the headlight kind of a thing, right? Because they didn't know what to do. Their service was not ready to be provided remotely on the edge. So what Juby said as the third layer, right, of the 3 layers that she was referring to. And what happened is for those 3-4 months, thankfully being a small startup which needs to survive, they were able to very quickly pivot the product and bring in video conferencing, bring its remote sensing capabilities into the product. And what I've seen in the last 6 months is that the adoption of those where now that tablet is actually mailed to the care home because people cannot go and physically do a therapeutic session. In the first, once they had this product and they went ahead and shipped it, people received it, but nobody actually opened them because they didn't know what to do. There's always a certain distance with technology, especially if you're talking with people over the age of 60 in a mental health domain. But then once they realize that it's impossible to actually have that care, they opened those boxes, took out those devices. And for the last 6 months, as I said, we are really seeing people are using it. And what is interesting is we are seeing that the kind of responses, the data which was being collected in terms of how those patients were responding to the iComi digital session. So
is it just an app or is it a standalone device?
A combination of a device and app.
Okay.
And initially it was mainly in a cloud-centric manner or cloud-first manner. But then because of Corona, they essentially had to put it on the device itself so that even without connectivity, there was potential interaction with the app. But the interesting part is the way people are reacting to those sessions is very different in the BC era before Corona to the IC or the in Corona era. So which means that the way the interface that people are working with is also changing the behavioral responses, which is the final endpoint that we are looking of giving them a change in their behavioral responses. So the same kind of digital program, which was being done by a caregiver sitting beside the patient in a BC context, in a BC era, when the same program, no change, except the mode of delivery, and of course the technology has been changed because now it's sitting on the device, simply because of the change in the environment, they are not seeing the caregiver. They are rather having a video call where they're seeing part of it, is leading to change. And I think that my sense is will happen across even in India, which means we will not only change the medium of delivery, but my guess is we will also see change in how healthcare as a service, as Mohan mentioned, is being adopted as and is affecting the life of people as we move to the edge.
Thank you, Samik. Manish, we don't see you, and doesn't mean we're not going to ask you questions. And I'm sure everybody's wondering why in a session on edge computing we have the largest cloud service providers, or one of the largest cloud service providers on. But I mean, I'm sure you can entertain us on why we got you. But
Sure.
in the context of, I mean, you said you're doing a lot with the government of India, and we see that. You could start with, telling us what you're doing with the government of India, and then telling us your belief systems being shifted because of the edge.
Yeah, let me just first solve the issue between the video and the world's largest cloud service provider. The video, the conferencing software is on cloud, so it's working perfectly fine. Unfortunately, the last mile is a Wi-Fi from a telecom service provider, so we still have challenges there. So having said that, I think the issue, Bipin, from the government's perspective, is that the realization has dawned that we do very little for our population, okay, in terms of healthcare, and all the data points out to that. If we look at in terms of GDP, we spend less than about 1.5% of our GDP on healthcare. While it may not correlate directly with some of the other larger and richer countries, but there are countries like US and Germany, which are probably spending like in double digits. But even closer home, in some of those parameters, you would find that Bangladesh, or for that matter, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, they are slightly better than us in terms of the overall spending. And the government is probably making a change now. The first change they made was the announcement of the Ayushman Bharat scheme, under which the insurance is granted for 400 million people below the poverty line, or the 40% of the population. Now, coupled with that is what we would like to call as the counterbalance to an insurance scheme, and which should be there. And it is the vision of wellness nation, which is predicated on the fact that the prevention will make sure that these costs just don't run away, okay, and don't become a big burden on the country. And models like that followed by Cuba, where prevention is better than of course treatment is something, and keeps number of treatments and the costs low, are important. So the government has done, has visualized setting up 155,000 wellness centers, which are basically the public health centers, but transformed into wellness centers, which will not only dispense advice on fighting lifestyle diseases right at the as I would like to call it, the edge of that envelope of medical service delivery, but will also help bring care to the rural areas. And now this is something which can only be enabled by technology. And of course, cloud plays a big role into it. But the other part, which of course I highlighted, the last mile connectivity plays a big role into it. And the whole care continuum. The idea is that we would probably deliver more care at the lower step, so that we can reduce the number of visits being made to the OPDs of our large hospitals. There is a McKinsey study which says that one can save something like $3.1 billion, or probably some number like that, just by reducing the OPD visits to institutes like AIIMS or the nearest tertiary care hospital. So the government's idea is like multifold. One, they have released the guidelines for telemedicine. The laws are being formed. The data protection laws are being formed for the medical data. And now, obviously, they are trying to experiment with solutions. So, e-Sanjeevani or Mera Aspatal, and these are the kind of solutions which the government is experimenting with. E-Sanjeevani as a telemedicine solution is already conducting something like 30,000 web consultations every day. And they are basically mimicking the OPD of a large, specialized hospital in the rural areas. The government's view is to take it to something like 500,000 consultations a day. So typically, the idea is that they will cut down the number of OPD visits people have to take just because they want to consult somebody good in that, in the nearby areas. Then comes the whole aspect of optimizing the cost of medical healthcare, right? So that's a whole gamut of solutions around, you know, insurance claims processing. Now, today, if you notice, our OPD visits are not covered under insurance. They are simply covered, only a hospitalization is covered. And the reason for that is that the cost of processing a claim is higher than the OPD visit. Okay, and therefore they always say that if you go to the OPD, you can always claim it back separately, but we will not do a cashless transaction around this. The only way to change this is to bring a certain amount of standardization into the way we handle the data, and then ultimately setting up what we would like to call as the claims clearance platform. Now, this will call for, doing eKYC, something which the telecom industry has done very well, and also setting up data lockers. So, the government is looking at can DigiLocker be that data locker? And there is our guideline which has been put forward to create a reference architecture of the health claims platform. So, there are several such initiatives are in the play. And, I think I also feel very, very encouraged about the fact that the government is now setting up a national grid for biobanks. Now, this will be the storehouse of all the data fundamentally on Indian genomic, study for Indian genomic studies. So the idea is that eventually, once this grid is built up, we would be able to figure out which parts of our country, which particular ethnicity is more susceptible to certain types of diseases, and therefore preventive medication. So there are, I think, these are humongous projects. They will make an impact in about 3 years, 4 years time. But it's with every step we are probably moving towards that goal. That's what I would like to add.
That was pretty informative, Manish. And Jubi, you had something to say?
Yeah, I was just while Manish was speaking, clearly there is a lot of efforts on the government side because it is an emergency situation and things need to improve on the ground. Now, the other way of thinking of it is also that healthcare is a very personal item, right? Everybody has their own personal choices about how they want to avail healthcare, where they want to avail healthcare. So, which means that it's not only about making things available, it's also about a level of conditioning that patients should be comfortable with accessing these services in the new manner that it is becoming available. And that's where I think a lot of these private companies, be it telemedicine firms, be it wellness firms, a lot of private players are doing a lot of innovation to condition the patients so that they become more amenable or they become more comfortable accessing telemedicine or accessing virtual care and effectively bringing care to them rather than they having to go to the place of care.
So, and I think Samik mentioned his perspectives on the Japanese society, which we think is quite advanced, and that's quite diverse.
And that's why I guess what Professor Mohan is also working on, a lot of the remote monitoring devices and how all this plays a great role in conditioning the patient in making them more comfortable with virtual care, right? Otherwise, even if it is available, it doesn't matter if the patient doesn't avail it.
Absolutely. And I'm going to point that question to Mohan. Sorry, Samik, in terms of what is it that they're doing that can aid this? You want to say something? Please go ahead.
No, I'll come back. I'll let Mohan take it. It's more relevant. But I just want to double down on what Jubi said. I think the trust is an important factor. We may have a lot of technologies, a lot of AI on the edge, but I think building that comfort and trust is a very critical part of healthcare as a service. So Mohan will probably have more insights. Thank you.
Yeah, more, Mohan.
Yeah. So one of the things which we're already seeing, if you look at it, COVID has actually made elective OP, ophthalmology, dermatology, and even in some cases, even general medicine checkup. I mean, hospitals actually have not received patients for the last almost 1.5 years. Now, today there are technologies available in ophthalmology, in dermatology, some extent in pediatrics. But what has not happened is they have not scaled. When I say scale, I'm talking about 10 million patients. I mean, that's the, at least the, not any given time, at least that's the patient base you need to get to a very large scale in terms of making this a service business. And this requires a little bit of standardization, but largely it's an awareness and mental conditioning, like what Juby had said. I mean, I've not been to an ophthalmologist for almost 1.5 years now. I mean, it should, and in some cases, people who need a checkup every 6 months, be it glaucoma, be it diabetic retinopathy, that's a huge, ophthalmology is actually one of the perfect target markets for this because it's non-invasive. It is amenable for home delivery in terms of care, but the scale is not there because it's not just about price point. The price points do work out in ophthalmology. If you look at it, you will be able to deliver this care at cheaper than what you will if you go to a ophthalmologist.
Yeah, I don't think there are rural ophthalmology centers easily accessible also, right, Mohan?
Yeah, it is easily accessible, but still the amount of unmet need is very high. Right? We're talking about 100 million kind of numbers. Right? So there needs to be some pull and push, right? Because it's not exactly a demand driven care, right? So it has to be awareness and conditioning to some extent, and the government, especially if you look at rural eye care, is totally untapped. I mean, it's completely just waiting there. So
you have a startup in that space?
I'm sorry. Yeah. So there are actually startups that have done quite well already. To take Forest Healthcare, which is not exactly a startup, it's already 11 years old. Is probably one of the most successful medical device startups. Was a medical device startup in the country, which has made global products. We have worked with them, and now they're entering the services market. And you realize that their challenge actually is to get this entire alignment between the patient, the super healthcare provider, because eventually you want it to be linked with a branded ophthalmologist, right? And government. This alignment needs some policy rejigging. And that is happening here and there. State governments are doing it in pockets, but that is what will drive this to a much larger scale. So then you're talking about a much larger business in terms of both service as well as in terms of technology. So then you will realize, and then India is very good at it. So what has happened in, be it OTT, telecom, or whatever Amazon has done. So that is where this should head to in order for you to make this a very large scale. And same happens in other things, pediatrics, dermatology, even dentistry for that matter. So you'll be very surprised how much untapped dentistry is, because especially with COVID and other things, I mean, dentistry is completely shut down today. I mean, dentists themselves don't want to do this, but even though there are people who want to be done. So there is quite a bit of work that needs to be done, so that you can see that, right? There are glues that are missing here. Yeah. So they need to be filled. And of course, this whole thing has to be market driven. It has to make business sense. Yeah. So just getting there, there needs to be more push.
And I guess that one of the glues that you mentioned is something that Manish spoke about, these 155,000 wellness centers. And I lead that into a question to Karan in terms of, do you have solutions for that, Karan? And I would request you to keep it short because we don't have too much time. And I would like to ask at least more to everybody else.
Yep. So tele-OPD, for example, we spoke a lot about. If you see today, tele-OPD has become quite big, right? A lot of us are doing consultation. And even then, to Mohan's point, total tele-OPD as a percentage of total OPD, which is happening on-premise, is very small percent. To understand this ecosystem, what has to scale up is not just a platform which connects the doctors to the patients, but which connects the hospitals and the doctors in the hospitals to the patient. What I mean is, there is a care continuum. I can just consult on a platform, standalone platform, and that can be an episode. But this is not Uber. Healthcare is not about, you taking a taxi from one place to the other. So unless and until the entire hospital ecosystem can provide virtual care through that OPD platform, this will not scale. So my point is understanding the ecosystem and incentivizing and providing the right economics and workflow for the hospitals to onboard. It's not just about technology, it's about understanding the entire workflow and the economics and providing hospital the capability to be able to onboard to provide virtual care is when really the scale will be built. And we definitely right now are working with partners to look at these OPD solutions and integrate with the hospital HRs in a way that my experience on this platform should be as good as I am in the hospital. I can generate my MRN number. If I have it, I already use that. I can make payment. I can order medicine. So everything that I can do in premise, I should be able to do here. And then if I want to visit, then the same entire information is available in the hospital for me to continue my care continuum.
Got it. Thank you, Karan. And I mean, I didn't want to ask any more questions, but do you have, or are you folks working on a solution where you can cut the doctor out and still give some kind of a diagnosis? I know Samik's solution does that, but everything that he spoke of always has the doctor in, hospitals connected, etc. Is there something?
You're trying to provoke, Bipin. You're trying to provoke.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So, I personally, and based on our interactions with ecosystem providers, we have realized that that's a strict no-no. And I think there's been various adages that are going around, which kind of say that that's not the path. At least that's not the path to go down right now. Where the path leads us, we'll wait and see. I'm sure you've heard the adage that AI will not replace a radiologist, but a radiologist using AI will replace a radiologist who does not. So it's an assist function and an extension of the ability to provide care that technology should focus on right now, rather than coming in with the intent.
You just punctured my dream. You just punctured my dream. I think I have one question that I will ask, and then we move the audience around. And that question is open to all of you. What is the most disruptive piece of technology that you see in the edge space that is necessary? It can be from the work that you do or what you would like.
Okay, sure.
Maybe you should go first, since.
Yeah, because so that's the perspective that I come from. And that's the question that we ask ourselves every day, that these are the use cases, these are workflows that our partners come to us with. And what is really the technology solution that is required as the foundation, as the bedrock, so that these workflows and use cases can be enabled. And frankly, there are many. Right? There are many problems that needs to be solved. I'll just take this time to talk about one. Yeah. And it's an interplay of a challenge which edge computing brings in, and that's about data decentralization. Right? So edge computing is enabling new centers which are generating data for themselves, and all this data is not coming into a central repository, but this is disaggregated data. And you need your solutions to work on disaggregated data. And as you can imagine, this problem becomes much more cumbersome when we are talking about AI. AI is data hungry. It needs a lot of data to become more efficient. But now data is in silos. What do you do about it? How do you still continue to make your models efficient, even though data is in silos? And that's where the concept of federated learning comes in. And Intel on its part is investing heavily into federated learning and maturing the federated learning framework to enable AI models to leverage
federated learning.
Disaggregated data, but still making it available to a centralized model in a secure and private way.
Great. Manish, please go next.
So I think, Vipin, our whatever limited involvement I have had with the experiment of eSanjeevani, okay, I think one of the things which will really make it happen is the point which was raised earlier. How can the patients in rural areas use this? Okay, the medical technology, yes, it will happen, but the point is, in a rural area, how can a poor man who is illiterate be able to use this without the help of, let's say, a person who's very computer literate? Because we even tried with the model that the CSCs, as they are called, can help them access healthcare. Now, the CSCs necessarily involve a cost. And the moment you put in a cost like 25 rupees or 30 rupees.
What is CSC?
CSC, Customer Service Centers. The Government of India has created a about 100,000 CSCs across the country, where you could go and get
From the wellness
things
center.
like Aadhaar card and all those kind of
Okay.
things
Yes,
done.
yes,
Okay.
sorry. Yes.
Now we even tried CSCs. That there is a CSC attendant there. He will help the person, participate in a tele consultation. But the restraint in the model is that there is a cost associated. He's got to pay 50 rupees or 55 rupees or whatever that small number is to access it. Whereas, if you connect directly, then that telemed consultation is free of cost. It's probably social, but and I don't know how technology is going to solve it. But if I could bring it in local language and I could help the people use it without an intervention from an assistant or an attendant, I think the uptake would be much higher. And that for me is one of the challenges. That's where the edge will play a big role also.
Okay, super. Mohan, from your perspective.
Yeah, so as I said, I mean, scale is what is needed. So which means you will need some form of standardization. Of course, we don't want to go the HIPAA way, which actually becomes the burden itself. Then you want to avoid it.
Are you aware of any standardization happening in this context, Mohan? If you can.
I'm sorry, say again. Sorry, I lost.
Are you aware of any standardization efforts happening in this?
Not really. I think that's going to be a bottleneck. Correct. I mean, there are ways India is able to handle certain things without standardization. But even in a siloed way, we need some form of bagging this data and information. Because see, it doesn't have to be, unlike financial transactions, doesn't have to be completely seamless. Right. Because healthcare is on demand. An average person.
Oops. Is it my problem or Mohan?
No, I think we lost Mohan's connection.
We lost him.
Well, as you said, the Manish, connectivity seems to be will probably be the driver for more edge computing.
I imagine if this happens when somebody's trying to look through your, blood pressure or pulse or whatever.
Yeah, I was hoping Juby would say, give us a magical answer saying we don't need doctors, everything can happen on the edge. Didn't happen.
That's right.
Yeah. Mohan, are you there?
We can make the edge intelligent to become, network fault tolerant.
Yes. I think the audience would like that answer. Karan, would you like to take that until Mohan comes back on?
Sure, really quick. So, the most disruptive edge as we see it, even for enterprise customers, but especially for consumer, is already here. It's a mobile phone. So a lot of stuff, applications, today, tele-OPD, if you see telemedicine 10 years back, you required a lot of equipment on both sides for telemedicine to happen. Today, it can happen anywhere because of the mobile phone. Similarly, our radiologists are able to report radiology exams from anywhere using our IT solution and using their own mobility devices. So I believe that's a very important disruptive edge.
Okay. Thanks, Karan. Manish, Samik, you're the last go until one comes back.
So for me, I think that the human, we have the field of human-computer interaction, HCI. I think human AI interaction, human edge interaction is something between, I think we are not putting a lot of effort on. Right. I think how the patient interacts with the edge, with AI on the edge, is something which will play an important role in the adoption, in their trust, in developing that comfort that they feel when they sit across the doctor. And I think as an industry, as a community, we should also focus on that interaction bit beyond the technology and the AI bit.
Yeah, that's a great point, Samik, and thanks. Mohan, you're back. Would you like to take it forward? Complete your. In the meantime, if anybody wants to put in more questions, audience questions, please feel free. We will. Vinay is choosing the questions to ask, and we will ask that. When are you back? he's raised his hand. I guess there's some issue. Until he comes back on, I'm going to, put the audience questions forward. We have one question from a gentleman, from somebody called Aruna Kishore, whose question is aimed at.
Sorry.
I'm on your back.
Yeah. Basically, there was a power outage, so I had to switch to a phone.
Oh, that's another. So we encounter two issues which will impact edge really.
Precisely.
Power and connectivity.
Absolutely. Now, this is actually partly the. So if you look at it, there's one point I wanted to make, which is for all of us to think about. Education, which is somewhat closer to healthcare, even though in a different degree of emergency and intensity, we have actually somewhat solved it.
Yeah.
Right? Even though it has scale and broadcast scale capability. So both of them, except for online, you don't need a completely seamless way, but you need some level of standardization of platform. Right? So you wait for the doctor, somebody comes in, there is a device, and then this is connected, and then you get the data. This is still not standardized. So there's some level of standardization that's needed. I don't think there is an explicit standardization effect that goes on right now. Eventually, what will happen is when businesses become reasonably successful, that will become the standard. I mean, that's really what happened in many other industries. So I would say it'll get there, but it'll take some time, right? Because today that market is in hundreds to thousands at the best. Right? So it has to get to hundreds of thousands, then it will pick up. Right? So that is for you to think about, right? So I mean, there are three places which technology was not successful in terms of getting into the service business directly. It was healthcare, education, and art, performing arts. So these are the three places if you think about. So there, education is already there. As you see, most of us are online in terms of education. Healthcare is probably where education was about 10 years ago. That'll give you some perspective. In fact, art is actually picking up also.
Yeah, isn't that the opportunity we are all after? And because we recognize it, that's and I guess what you're saying is scale is necessary and standardization is one of the avenues to achieve that scale. Is that what I hear?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mohan. So with that, I'm going to open it up to audience questions. And the first question that Vinay pointed me to was from a question from Aruna Kishore. I'm also interested to hear from Manish on how AWS outposts can be leveraged in edge computing. Manish, question to you.
Okay, now that's a very interesting question, Vipin. So outpost, we've tried it in several scenarios, and I think so. One, of course, where we found the lack of connectivity. But there is this tertiary care hospital in rural Punjab, and we are using outposts there to make sure that the connectivity challenges are kind of overcome. Okay. The second is that outposts can always be used for data, which has a tremendous amount of gravity. So, the genomic data or the biobank related data or heavy duty images in case of cancer, etc. Which can be pre-processed and only then the results can be part of the biobanks, so that the models can work on the cloud, but some pre-processing can happen on the outpost. Okay. That is yet another one. But from my perspective, outposts can bring the edge closer, but it's still not the edge in the sense that it has capabilities which can serve a larger area. Now, when we're talking about truly the edge, I think it has to be either an embedded system or somebody said mobile phone, something like that.
Okay, I hope that answers Aruna's question. I'm not going to debate that. I'm going to move to the next question, which Ravi has, and he's asking Ravi Chirukula. He says edge AI for medical imaging is likely to be slow and scale in India. Cost may be a factor. In that, something else he says that I'm going to say skip that. In that context, for clearing up the for for clearing up the system, federated learning seems impossible to set up in this context. The views and policy direction would be helpful.
So I'll just jump in for a second. I think a part of that question is where Outpost comes into play. Okay, we put it in and give you certain amount of capability to handle those images, not eating up your bandwidth, etc. But personally, I think that doesn't impede federated learning. Just wanted to say that before you go to somebody else.
Yeah, and I was hoping Juby would answer that. I don't see her. Juby, you want to take that a little more? Okay, we move to the next question that somebody spoke about. About education. Online training can play a supplementary role for tech. No, that's. Can someone throw light on the laws governing telemedicine in India by Manoj Swain? Would anybody like to take a stab at that?
So the policy document
sorry, go on, Karan. Go on. It's okay.
I was just saying the policy document came out last year. Maybe we could socialize it on the TIE website.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
And if you can post a link to it right away, that'll be even better. Actually,
okay. I wanted to quickly add, Bipin, that someone mentioned about training. So one of the things that's happening is with these medical devices going into more and more tier 2 and beyond, there is need for supporting protocols and application support while someone is doing a scan, let's say on a CT or an MR. Right. One of the edge devices that GE has created in India for India, now it's going global, is called a digital expert. So it's a customized, very, very secure tablet with a video conferencing capability which connects with the CT or an MR. And someone sitting remotely, our application specialist, can be consulted. Just as in a tele-OPD, you can take appointment with the doctor. On this device, you can take appointment with our application specialist. And he's able to immediately plug in and provide you support right then and there when you need it. So that's another use case of combining edge with a need for training and application support to provide our healthcare providers with the service that they're trying to do.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Karan. I think that training was something that we didn't really cover, and you brought it up beautifully. I think we are way past time, and I won't, unless Vinay and Anand gives us some more, I won't take anybody's time. I think it was a beautiful session. Samik, Manish, Karan, Mohan, and Juby. Oh, Vijayta says I can continue for some more time. Is there any other question that the audience would like to ask? No, I guess we are okay then. Any last statements from you that we didn't cover? Something that we may have missed? Samik, Manish, Karan, Mohan.
So Karan here. I'll go very quickly. Yes, I can't overemphasize as GE the importance of no one company being able to do this, and hence an ecosystem of companies and also startups. And as GE Healthcare, we have this Edison Accelerator program in India and a developers program in US, where we are really looking at combining the power and strength and innovativeness of startup ecosystem. And I know Amazon has it, Intel has it, yes, to really guide them and help them bring the technology.
Yes. So that is your startup ecosystem. I know Amazon has to. Manish, you want to quickly talk about that? Juby, you too.
Hey, look, so I think Amazon's very focused on startups, and so the Amazon Activate program, of course, encourages a lot of startups.
We're talking about healthcare.
Yeah, I understand. Activate is focused on healthcare also, Bipin. And other than that, we have a GovStart program, which is again focused on health companies which are focused on healthcare, solving the public healthcare problems. And yeah, we do have a pretty big partnership with Intel where we are supporting companies jointly. So maybe Juby will talk a little bit about other Intel initiatives. But yeah, together we are really supporting these startups right from conceptualization of the product to taking them all the way to scaling up. So, yeah.
So Jubi, did you want to add to what Manish spoke about their thing?
It goes without saying that the ecosystem, it's an ecosystem play, and startups are an important part of that ecosystem. And India is the third largest startup ecosystem in the world, and there are about greater than 3,000 healthcare startups in the country. So it's no small ecosystem by any
Huge
means.
number. Yeah.
And Intel, does healthcare is one of the key verticals under which we incubate startups, and there have been some phenomenal startups trying to do mass screening, diagnostic devices, genomic sequencing. So phenomenal work, ambitious, really ambitious, and BHAG goals being taken up by the startups.
I know we didn't cover a lot of that because our focus was edge. Maybe we'll have another session. But I don't want to wind this up without something that Som has been asking me, and he has asked me before too. Can we touch upon the health stack? I don't know how to bring this into the edge piece, but any of you working directly or indirectly on the health stack, which the Ministry of Health and Family Affairs is putting together, I think it's being spearheaded out of Bengaluru. The iSpirit Foundation is doing it. Any of you working on that?
Not directly at this point.
Karan, Samik, do you have plans?
We have a lot of plans, Vipin. And as somebody wrote on the chat, it should be for another topic. But I think coming from where we are, I think I find that very, very exciting, the India health stack. But once we get there, we will see it. So I'll reserve my comments. But coming from where we sit, we find that an absolutely exciting part of the India healthcare ecosystem.
Karan, are you? I mean,
Yeah.
it's a big thing. India. I mean, the health stack per se in India.
Right. So we are in an evaluatory stage, but the fundamental idea is that for every hospital, and that's where we interact, for them to get onto the health stack, for them to get onto the NDHM network and participate in it actively, they need a certain minimum digital footprint. We want to be able to provide that. So that's where we are evaluating and working.
Great to get Mohan's views on it. Mohan, are you there? Okay, I'm afraid he's dropped out. Manish, I'm sure you have a lot to do with the health stack. Please enlighten us very quickly.
No. So look, we've had our own share of working with that, and some of the applications like Coven for good. We worked on those in some ways, and including Arogya Setu and some others. So I think the big point is that India health stack, it has been conceptualized, and but it's still evolving to some extent. There are changes being made to it, and it's a big ecosystem with NDHM sandbox ready. I think some of the startups are well advised to probably look at that sandbox and work with it, because that will help them be ready for NDHM ASAP.
Yes, thanks for bringing up the sandbox, Manish. Jubi, anything on the health stack? Are you folks doing anything? Are the startups that you're aware of or you're working with, are they doing anything on the health stack?
No, I already mentioned it. Right now, no, we are not in close collaboration. We are closely tracking the developments. There's a lot of material out there, and like you said, there's a sandbox implementation being taken up with the union territories. There's a lot of information right now, not in close collaboration yet.
Thank you, and I guess we will wind up on that note. It was an immense pleasure, Karan, Jubi, Samik, Manish, and Mohan, even though he's not there right now. It was a wonderful session. At least for me, it was a lot of learning. And with that, I thank you all. And Vinay, I leave it to you and Vijeta and Anand, if Anand is still there, to you to take it forward.
Yes, Bipin and panelists, Anand here. I'm still here. And a really exciting session. I wish we had a little more time, and the perspectives were very good. You covered a wide range within 60 minutes, and of course we have more topics coming up. So thanks once again to the panelists. And I think we had very good audience, attentive and with lots of questions. So thank you, audience. And please look forward to more programs from TI Bangalore and IoT Forum.
Yeah, and sorry, this is Shomya. I'd love to add for folks in the panel as well as the audience. We are kind of, in fact, Bipin has been kind of moonlighting our special interest group on the healthcare side. We have had multiple 14 SIGs very active across industrial, across global connects, events, and Edge AI, of course, right? So if any one of you are interested to kind of take leadership, approach in this healthcare SIG and drive the aspects of Edge, health stack, and so forth from our IoT forum, you're most welcome. We're trying to form the healthcare SIG at this point and beef it up. Lots of initiatives can be taken up from TI and the entire 25,000 member community, 2,200 plus startups are all ready to jump in.
Thanks. So I missed that. I should have added that and sought participation in that. Thank you for bringing that up.
And I think, Vipin, we should give you a round of applause for some really, really wonderful way that you moderated and brought out all the insights, and you brought the best out from the panelists. Thank you so much for that. First, well, you were wonderful. Really, really, thank you. You've been following, and I must say this very quickly. The way he followed up, he just took over everything, curated the questions, brought in everyone, and thank you so much, Vipin. And yes, we would love to continue working with people from the AWS, from GE Healthcare, from AWS, and Intel. Of course, we do work with them because of Ashok and other folks. But it was wonderful. We must keep the tempo going, Vipin, and you have played an integral part in this. Of course, Som, TRA, Venki from the IT forum. Wonderful stuff. Thank you from TI Bangalore and to all our volunteers and to the wonderful audience. You guys participated, lots of wonderful questions.